From controversial casting choices to widespread backlash towards a rather vital element in his overall universe, you can bet Mr. Feige wishes he had a time stone handy when it came to these particular MCU happenings. Marvelous Gareth here from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 things that didn't go the way Kevin Feige wanted. Number 10. Whitewashing Doctor Strange. From inspired, unexpected decisions to throw former Human Torches behind a shield, to unleashing remarkably charming former WWE wrestlers covered in prosthetics, the casting team behind the Superworld has clearly scored more hits than misses. However, when it came time to produce the first ever big screen adventure for a certain Stephen Strange back in 2016, news of Feige and his Marvel force casting a white actor in the role of the Ancient One looks like a huge mistake out of the gates. From the off, fans and critics alike blasted Marvel Studios for not sticking to what was on the page, in the casting of the typically Asian male role and whitewashing the part instead. With Feige eventually going on record later down the road when discussing the thought process behind casting Tilda Swinton in the part by admitting, "We thought we were being so smart and so cutting edge." How wrong they were, eh? Number 9. Respected stars refusing to appear or return. Marvel Studios would have you believe that landing a role in the sprawling ocean of comic book creativity that is the MCU is the be-all and end-all for just about every thespian plying their trade in the business today. Yet the sheer amount of well-known names who have not only turned down appearing in the super landscape over the last decade plus, but sometimes even refused the chance to step back into the MCU after an initial outing, tells an entirely different story. From Joaquin Phoenix and Matthew McConaughey passing up on the likes of Doctor Strange and Ego respectively, to Hugo Weaving and Terrence Howard refusing to return for their roles of Red Skull and James Rhodey due to being asked to take a substantial pay cut. Each of these instances of talented thespians telling Feige and the gang where to go clearly weren't part of the initial plan and forced a serious change in direction in each case. And while you could argue that the recasting of said roles more than delivered the goods in the end, it was likely a headache the Marvel Studios president wished he didn't have to contend with when all was said and done. Number 8. A not-so-incredible Hulk. Hot on the heels of Tony Stark's eye-catching first steps into a burgeoning MCU, arguably a name even more notable than the one donning the Iron Man suit was handed their invite to the super party. However, instead of capturing the imaginations of fans the world over and successfully reimagining Bruce Banner and his hulking green alter ego, Marvel quickly learned the hard way that this game-changing MCU undertaking wasn't going to be a walk in the park from the off. Behind-the-scenes troubles when bringing the project into being in the first place, coupled with a hugely disappointing critical reception and performance at the box office, led to the Incredible Hulk quickly becoming an entry that Marvel and Feige did their utmost to forget about almost instantly. The recasting of Mark Ruffalo in the more problematic Edward Norton's titular role only seemed to hammer home Feige's need to put this error behind the studio too. That being said, Marvel Studios appear to be slightly softening their stance towards all things green as of late, with Disney Plus's She-Hulk Attorney at Law looking set to properly reintroduce Tim Roth's Abomination, and perhaps a few more elements from that 2008 failure down the road. Number 7. Sony's Spider-Verse. Marvel Studios finally getting their mitts on everyone's favorite Sony web-slinger, heading into the already stacked Captain America Civil War was the sort of development that left fans simply not believing their luck, and Kevin Feige and the MCU gang likely felt the same way. However, Sony's eventual decision to start carving out their own Spider-Verse with the intention of one day bringing Holland's webhead back into the mix has likely left Feige slightly regretting bringing Peter Parker into his universe in the first place. In fact, with Feige being said to have a say in the crafting of the stories being told involving the likes of Venom and Morbius, it came as little surprise to hear that the Marvel Studios president recently reportedly told the inconsistent super studio to not get too ahead of itself in terms of building some larger universe in the vein of the Avengers movies. Clearly, said advice fell on deaf ears with the jarring and lazy introduction of Michael Keaton's Vulture in Jared Leto's Vampire Dud, again feeling like a shameless way of piggybacking on the overall success of Feige's Wonderland and building towards a wider world next to nobody is interested in. Number 6. A string of forgettable villains. While Marvel Studios may have unquestionably knocked it out of the park when it pertains to the crafting of three-dimensional and lovable protagonists on the big and small screen for the most part, the same sadly has often not been the case on the more villainous part of the spectrum. Sure, in Thanos, the MCU brought to life one of the most compelling and layered big bads ever to set foot into a cinematic stage. And the same could be said for the likes of Black Panther's Eric Killmonger and the ever-present God of Mischief, Loki. However, when looking back on his Marvel legacy as a whole, Kevin Feige probably isn't too proud of the overall caliber of villain the studio have produced. And it's not as though Marvel haven't tried to bolster some of the less intriguing forces of evil with some serious talent behind the antagonist wheel either, with the likes of Christopher Eccleston, Mads Mikkelsen, and most recently Ethan Hawke trying to spin something compelling out of often uninspired material. Yet the record still shows that Feige and Marvel Studios as a whole haven't quite cracked the formula when it comes to pumping out consistently captivating sinister obstacles. Number 5. Unwanted director changes. The reveal of the Fantastic Four finally being introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe back in late 2020 was already enough to leave most fans jumping for joy. So when Feige only went and added the director of the much-adored MCU Spider-Man trilogy, John Watts, to the already intriguing concept, the excitement surrounding this much-needed reboot of Marvel's first family soon became palpable. But in what merely acted as the latest case of things not going according to the thoroughly mapped-out plan, Watts later bowed out of directing duties, much to Feige and the gang's disappointment. And joining Watts in the category of one-time MCU directors who decided this larger-than-life supersphere just wasn't for them is the likes of Edgar Wright, who famously clashed with the studio over their vision for his proposed Ant-Man feature, and another recent in Scott Derrickson, stepping away from Doctor Strange sequel duties due to creative differences too. Simply put, not everyone fits the Marvel movie director mold, which is something Feige and the team have had to figure out for themselves through countless cases of behind-the-scenes trial and error. Number 4, The INHUMANS. Even their less watched or celebrated Disney Plus outings have proved that the MCU definitely has the potential to be a serious player on the small screen. The same cannot be said for some of the earlier Marvel Studio attempts at cracking TV, however, with the ill-fated ABC INHUMANS fiasco in particular sitting as perhaps Feige's biggest television failure to date. After initially unveiling the concept of introducing the faction via big screen feature back in 2014, Feige went on record to note, "We really do believe the INHUMANS can be a franchise or a series of franchises unto themselves." However, plans would ultimately change to the point of shuffling the super team onto the small screen instead, with Feige later revealing how he still had hopes for the INHUMANS later arriving in cinemas around the time of Phase 4. That really worked out, didn't it? With said series eventually arriving to little fanfare and being utterly panned by critics and fans alike, all talk of an INHUMANS corner of the MCU was killed off in the wake of its cancellation. But at least Anson Mount was given a chance to step back into his Black Bolt shoes for Multiverse of Madness, so that's something. Number 3, CGI Backlash. With the studio stuffing more content onto screens by the year than ever before over the course of Phase 4, it appears the need to quickly rush new projects into theaters has resulted in a serious drop in quality when it pertains to MCU CGI world and character building. Purse strings being tightened, deadlines being consistently brought forward, and Marvel's penchant for constantly changing their minds has reportedly left a ton of VFX artists working on MCU productions feeling disheartened, overworked, and now wanting absolutely nothing to do with their small and big screen projects going forward. Make no bones about it, Feige has a serious problem on his hands when it comes to the studio's ever-growing reliance on all things computer-generated, and the suggested poor treatment of those bringing these increasingly rushed effects into existence. And it's one that looks as though it could be set to get much worse before it gets any better, judging from She-Hulk's heavily criticized CGI-heavy look in initial trailers. Number 2, awards pushes haven't really worked out. For all of the unprecedented box office success Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios have enjoyed over the last 4 phases, it has still often felt as though the superhero genre in general hasn't been given the sort of critical respect afforded to more traditional dramatic pieces of cinema. And while the likes of the DC Universe has seen a few of its actors earn serious awards acknowledgement, with the likes of Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix both picking up Oscar gongs for their work as the Joker, Marvel Studios have still yet to be given so much as a nod in the more respected acting categories. It isn't through lack of trying, however, with Feige very much banging the drum for the likes of Robert Downey Jr. and co. on the back of Avengers Endgame's eventual arrival, putting up a ton of the film's stars for consideration in the Best Supporting Actor and Actresses categories in the lead up to that year's ceremony. Unsurprisingly, next to no attention was paid to the moving performances of RDJ and co. when it came to the eventual Oscar nominations though, with all of the campaigning in the world still not convincing the Academy to take notice of Feige's feature players. Number 1, most of Phase 4 so far. With Thor: Love and Thunder marking what appears to be the halfway point of Marvel Studios' Phase 4, a quick appraisal of the cinematic and televised projects let loose from WandaVision onwards points to the biggest franchise in the game not quite matching the heights of its previous displays. The already noted decision to force more content than ever before out of their Marvel machine hasn't in any way consistently equaled critical smashes, and the sort of stunning pieces of blockbuster cinema seen in everything from Thor Ragnarok to Guardians of the Galaxy. If anything, it's often felt as though Marvel is simply treading water before properly doubling down on the next incoming super baddie in Kang, and heavily hinted at ensemble epic that is the MCU's take on Secret Wars. And while there have still been bright sparks in the form of a few small screen darlings, with Spider-Man No Way Home and Shang-Chi both proving there's still life in the MCU on the cinema screen too, you can bet that Feige was hoping for a much more triumphant expansion of his universe than the often lackluster and tired next phase of filler the studio have delivered up to this point. And that's our list. Know of any other things that didn't go the way Kevin Feige wanted? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're there. Also, if you like this kind of thing, then head on over to whatculture.com and find some more awesome articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from whatculture.com. Thank you as always for clicking on this video today. I hope to see you very, very soon, but in the meantime, be good to yourself. Bye bye.